We're going to get into our final review of the day, and that is going to be for Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan, which just ended, final season, all wrapped up, highly anticipated. People were really looking forward to it, and we're going to be talking about did it live up to the hype. Some people consider this one of the best animes ever. Even not even just animes, one of the greatest television shows ever. Um, so I'm gonna pass the stage. He's really in love with this show. I'm gonna let him describe the plot of Attack on Titan and get into the final season of the show. So, Sage, let us know about Attack on Titan.
Yeah. One small thing before I even get into the plot. I don't know if you had heard this, but this show actually won an award, I believe, it was 2022 that this happened, just last year. But it won some sort of international award for being the first non-English language TV show to be the most in-demand TV show globally.
Wow,
So
even more
that's I
than
mean that tells you
wow.
something about its impact, at least, for sure.
I can't believe it beat out even something like One Piece, huh?
Yeah, yeah. At least for that year.
Okay.
Or well, I guess it was the first time something non-English language ever won that award or was ever in that position. So it does say something about the impact it's had. But yeah, no, totally correct. I'm a big fan of this. Watched it right about when it first came out, and I've been coming along for 13 years with it now. It's hard to talk about a lot of it without giving into too many spoilers, but I think we start off with the series of walled cities. There's giants. They're kind of zombie-like coming in, and there's a big tragedy to start things off, and it spurs the characters on to join the military and try to kind of rid the world of these monsters. And as the show starts to kind of peel the layers back, it's much more about the monsters that people are, and the way that human beings treat each other and abuse each other, and that the literal monsters are almost tame in comparison, and into the crimes that human beings will commit against one another.
Mm, yeah. And it follows a protagonist named Aaron Yeager. Is who you'll see in the show. Boy comes from a small village. You mentioned there's a huge disaster that happens at the beginning of the show that spurs his intense hatred of these titans, these beasts that you see in this show.
Somewhat
Um,
reminiscent of Hiroshima, for sure.
yeah, there's a lot of parallels that you can draw there to real life. And obviously, Hiroshima was big for Japan and its culture in terms of inspiring lots of works of fiction, most notably probably Godzilla, things like that.
Akira too.
Akira. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Godzilla was from the atom bomb. I'm sorry, not really from. Yeah.
Mm,
Oh yeah, yeah, Hiroshima. Yeah, the atom bomb.
yeah.
So yeah, um, yeah. So yeah, for it's very much a lot of the fictional events there. There and a lot of culture there. So yeah, so you have Aaron Yeager who you follow, and then his, of course, with any anime, you got to have a trio. They love the
Yes,
trio. So
they
you got
do
to have
love that.
his, what I mean, his other besties there, Mikasa, who is his friend, and then you have Armin, who's his other best friend. And then they have a duty. They have a close friendship, and they join also the military with them. And then it's something called the scouts is something they want to be heavily a part
Yeah.
of because the scouts are the people that are on the front lines, and they go and then they go outside the walls. And there's these huge walls there, and each wall has a different name, like Wall Maria, as we see at the beginning, and that's the one that gets knocked down there. That's the one that placed there. And it turns at first the show there is your traditional shonen anime, I feel like, and this is Ant right here. Hello there, Ant. If you can get his stuff there. How you feeling there, man? Um, I don't know if your screen's black there, but
Let me
I'm gonna
focus.
come back. Oh yeah, there you go.
I don't
There's
know
Ant.
what's going on. What's up, man? How y'all doing?
Good, man. You
Good. How
just
are you
came
doing?
just in time, man. I was just setting all things up here. Got a great lead off from Sage about this, about Attack on Titan. So I'm just, for people who've never seen the show before, everything like that, I'm just talking a little bit about it. I'm gonna pass it to you in a second, and allow you to introduce yourself there, Ant. So yeah, like I mentioned, yeah. So the scouts, part of the military there, and it starts like a very traditional shonen kind of figure there of like big monsters and this young protagonist who has a chip on his shoulder because of his the events in his past. He wants to take on these things, and you're following him with him for that. But then as the series kind of goes on, more things start to unravel. Politics start to more come in, especially in season 3. I've been binging the show. I just started binging it after the final episode happened. It was done. I just started binging the entire show, so I haven't finished it yet. But we're gonna get it. We're still gonna get into season 4 there and delve into things in season 4. But we're gonna do a spoiler review later on in Monday. There, we're gonna do a spoiler review there, if that's okay with you, Ant. If that's fine there.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
So yeah, we're gonna be doing that there. But yeah, so you kind of see it. So more things start to kind of come up there. This mystery starts to unravel, as Sage mentioned, about more of the evil of humanity. And there's tons of real life comparisons that you can kind of bring in the real world there. And then in terms of especially propaganda, and the military, and inspiring new generations to fall for this propaganda, to hate other groups of people. So it's you know very much a show I think you can have a lot of different conversations about, and really get into a lot of things. And also the mythology of the show, of the Titans and where they come from. It's not such a simple thing and simple answer maybe when you first think about it. And Sage has mentioned before, if you have finished the show, maybe it's worth going back rewatching it to catch other like hints and things like that to follow through of other things that gonna get revealed later on. But I'm going to pass it to you, Ant. If you want to introduce yourself, let people know all about you, what you got going on, and your thoughts on Attack on Titan, the final season.
Absolutely. So, my name is Anthony. I write comic books. I made a manga recently. Ant Stokes, the writer. Oh shit. Uh,
What?
and my opinion on Attack on Titan, I think it's the greatest television show. Maybe ever. I truthfully believe that. I think um when you look at it, you said it. It starts off as kind of like a typical shonen, and then not just every season. Every season is kind of broken up into two halves. Every single one of those seasons is like a different, almost like a different genre. Like the first season is almost like a war movie. The second, war um anime, I guess. The second half is almost like more horror. The second season is it takes a really crazy structure where it's like out of sync. Everybody's doing different things. The third season is almost like a Bourne esque, almost like a political thriller.
Mhm.
And then the back half of the third season is its own little thing, and you get the four different parts of the season, and it works from beginning to end. And you can also kind of just consume these arcs as their own little individual story. You can kind of pick up wherever you want. So I think it works on every level that a TV show needs to.
Yeah. For me, I didn't really start really loving this show, I don't think, until probably season 3. And especially season 3, where you meet kind of these, you've already met them already, but Commander Irwin, Captain Levy, people like that. And like it was towards the end of season 3, and like this chess game that's going on between the Titans and between
Don't say
mili-
it.
yeah, the military there that we see there. Um, I mean, we could spoil obviously things leading up to season 4, obviously, because
Okay.
obviously, yeah, we can spoil things
Yeah.
leading up there. But just not season 4 itself there.
I
But
think
kind of
season three is definitely where it takes off. I think that's where it kind of elevates from, you know the beginning of season three, where it's like, okay, this is a political thriller, and then the end of season three, where it's like, okay, we really know what the story's about. I think that's when it steps up significantly in quality.
yeah. And just the way the Titans, are used in this show, they're almost treated like nukes, almost. You know what I mean? Like it helps to have your own, Titan and in this war that's kind of been going on, that's been raging on. And it kind of how it elaborates on that. But Sage, you want to get into, I guess, things leading up to season 4, and kind of where we are there.
Yeah. Well, I actually want to piggyback off of what you just said because I think there's a really interesting theme present in the show right there, kind of at the end of season 3, and I think it kind of pulls in this commentary about the nature of how warfare changed going into World War One. And you take the things like gas weapons and kind of the shift in technology, and almost the Titans almost feeling like humans being outdated in warfare. And I think there's a really, really interesting element there because there's this fear, right, for these people based on that. You see how technology is kind of starting to outgrow these things, and it feels like this really fascinating kind of transition from the age of primitive spears and swords and medieval weaponry to gas and planes and the things that the Geneva Convention had to be written to prevent, you know?
That's a great. I never thought of it as a World War One metaphor. There's obviously like, yeah, I think you can read into like the Israeli Palestine and Nazi Germany as well. That's really
Yeah.
that's a really astute observation. That's
I think. Oh, sorry.
I'm about to say real quick. That's like one of the best parts of season 4 is when it just drops you into this whole other show, and yeah, it's like we're kind of the Titans. They're almost like it's almost like the queen on your chessboard. Like you kind of have to be careful how you deploy it. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
And you
There's a
mentioned
strategy to it.
Yeah, and then even at the beginning of season 4, like, there's the scene where they introduce and you see them just dropping people out the sky, like, they see dropping just titans out the sky here, like bombs, how they can just be used that way. And so in case you haven't seen, like, we're gonna be doing spoilers at least for the first 3 seasons, there, but in case you hadn't seen that, I don't know why you'd be watching the season 4 talk if you haven't seen the other 3 seasons, but just to let you know, so the Titans that you see in the show, that at first that you think they're just these, zombie-like creatures with no minds. Other Titans start to appear that seem more intelligent, that seem like they have a consciousness, and it turns out that these Titans, all of Titans, used to be humans. Um, and they were transformed into these things. And then there are some that can retain their intelligence. You have certain names of certain titans in the show. They have specific names, like 'cause it's almost like this anime is a mix of various different. It's like a mech anime, plus it's a horror anime, plus it's a political anime, war anime. So the mech aspect comes from these people who turn into titans. They have to do it by hurting themselves. So that some will cut themselves or bite themselves. Like Aaron specifically bites his hand, and he'll turn into a titan. So that's how usually people do that, and then that's how they'll become. And then Aaron's titan is a founding titan plus a attack
He's
titan.
got like 5
Yeah.
by
So
the end of by the end of the series.
when you like a titan can kill another person who is also a titan and gain their titan ability. There's like a colossal titan, an armor titan, jaw titan. So some specifically have names. It says you want to get into more of the kind of mythology behind the titans, where they come from, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that all kind of unfolds right in the same part of the story that we were talking about just before, right? It kind of all cracks open at once at the end of the 3rd season, and you get this story about like a 2,000-year-old race war, essentially, that is involved with empires and the Titan race itself. That's I think the great twist of the story is that the people in the walls that are so, when Aaron first shows himself to be one of these things, they're so afraid of him. They have such animosity towards him. And then that the twist is that collectively these people are the race of Titans. And so they have this ancient history that goes back, and they're being oppressed right now by a people that they supposedly oppressed for 1,000 years before, and you get these dueling sets of propaganda. You get one side, you have, this little girl was uh, made a deal with the devil and became this horrible monster and just ruled over the world with tyranny. And then you get another group of people saying, no, she was a goddess that built up the world and never did anything wrong and had this perfect altruistic history. And so you get these, you can see right away that neither of these stories is entirely true or false. And I love how they pit these two sets of propaganda against each other. And to kind of to link that into the political parallels or the historical parallels that we were just talking about. Obviously, tech wise, time period wise, you have the armbands very World War II. You can see some Israeli-Palestine conflict in there as well. A good friend of mine that grew up in China and moved here in college was telling me when she watched it that she saw very much kind of the opinion that a lot of people in China have about Japanese people based on the war crimes that Japan committed during its imperial stage in World War II. And then I think, we really boil it down to the actual ethnicities. The Marlians, which is the kind of currently oppressors, very much represent the Roman ethnicity, and the Eldians, which are the Titan race, very closely represent the Celtics that the Romans wiped. So I think, sometimes I see people get a little caught up in, it's, trying to be this, it's trying to be World War II, or it's trying to kind of say something about a specific point in time. And I think that is, you could see that, but I think it's a little surface level. And I think the more interesting way to look at it is that it's more about applicability. It's about a broader sense of cycles and how people oppress each other and treat each other throughout really large scale historical cycles, and how things bubble and explode and calm and re-escalate and change dynamics in terms of who's in power. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good stuff there.
I think if I were to, I think that's a great point about it being broad. I think maybe a couple things you could point at Attack on Titan. That it's not flawless, right? Like it's definitely not anything trying to say this much, right? Like it's going to be flawed, if not heavily flawed. But I do
Reiner
think
transferring his consciousness out of his brain is like the number one thing I think of when you say that.
That's rough. I think like a lot of it does have the shonen syndrome for the first 2 seasons for sure. And then the pacing in the 4th season, breaking it up into 4 parts was insane. But no Historia as well, and like basically the 4th season at all was crazy. But I'm not trying to go through all the bad things, but I think like the ideology is a little bit by design. I think a little bit convoluted. I think his point stands, but I think Americans are pretty much like, you could argue on both sides. You can argue like kind of like adjacent, or you can argue completely removed. And I think if you're, one of these groups that is like going through this stuff currently, or, like more recently, I think it could be, I don't want to say problematic, because that's the easy thing to call it, but it could be a little dicey.
Hit too close to home.
Yeah, especially, yeah, I think so, because I mean, you could, and this is the thing, right? Like we can't even argue the ethics of Marley. Like we can't take a pro Marley stance for argument's sake without.
No.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's, yeah. So it's without it getting a little uncomfortable, right? So I think maybe that's not a huge deal. I do think like if you're looking at this, and trying to like use this as like, they couldn't debate this on Real Time with Bill Maher. Like it's too broad. But I think if you look at it as, like you said, kind of just like a cycle of, talking about the cycle of violence, I think it's brilliant, and I think the characterization as a war, as a piece of what this is basically is a piece of war fiction. How many TV shows are able to develop, both sides in a conflict like this much, to where and for the other side, for the Marley side, you spend 3 episodes with them, like 2.5, really, and then you get to know the characters so well, in that time frame. And you even the Titans that we've been killing. Oh man, these are real people. It's amazing character building. I think.
Yeah. And the beginning of season 4, because at least I've seen that. I've seen at least the beginning there. And you're like Ant mentioned, you're introduced to these whole new set of characters. You're introduced to the Marlins, who are, that's the other side of the conflict that there. We've been mostly spending through the last 3 seasons, spending all our time with the Eldians, the Eldians are the race of Titans there. And you see the Marlins and you see the propaganda on them, and how they look at the other side. And it's like they live, to them, they said the Eldians live in a paradise. They live in a space all to themselves, and up there. And then you have some Eldians who are with the Marlins, who work for the Marlins, who are used there in their conflict. And you see how severely looked down upon they are and treated poorly.
War
How they are,
slaves, basically.
yeah, um, I was just talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the trailer for that. And if you remember the last movie, I was talking about the last movie, War of the Planet of the Apes, and you had the certain apes that were working with the humans. If you ever seen that, it's kind of like that. It's kind of and
House
that's it.
apes.
Yeah, you got some house, house Eldians there.
Oh
Uh,
no. Oh no.
I mean, house, yeah, Eldians there that are working for the Marlins there, and you see that in this conflict, they are gonna just send. It's basically they're treating them as like they're gonna strap bombs to them and gonna have them just run out there and just get slaughtered there. 800 of them, just like that. They're just gonna sacrifice 800 lives. That's how little in value that their lives are in this, and then they're doing all this to one day, be treated as a Marlin, and you just. And I thought that was fascinating there. You know what I mean? Of seeing that, if we've seen all this, for those 3 scenes to see this from this other side. I thought that was really well done. The creator of this, of
Isayama.
the,
Hajime Isayama.
Yeah.
um, what we talked a little bit about it before. Sage, what's some of his inspirations for this show and make behind
Yeah, well, I can cite right away, and one that might even seem obvious, especially if you've watched the whole thing. But Breaking Bad, I know I've heard him say was one, and you can
Really?
definitely, I think you can definitely see it in the protagonist the shift of that character arc as it goes on. Um, I know that at one point Game of Thrones, though, I also remember hearing him be one of the people that was complaining about the ending to it.
That
So,
makes
but
more sense
earlier
though.
Game of Thrones,
That
yeah,
that would
yeah.
lead to him being more involved in it. And I want to make a point. I'm gonna put a pin in that. But
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. But and then one that I have never heard him say, but that I have felt at least for a long time that I see a lot of in there is Dune, and I think and Aaron Yeager. If I'm gonna go, what other fictional characters does he really remind me of? Paul Atreides is like the first thing I think of, especially if you kind of know the larger, because I don't want to spoil other things here, but if you kind of know Dune and the story of Dune and how that kind of plays out, yeah, I see a lot of that character in there. But actually, I want to even pull back to like really broad, kind of ancient storytelling even. But I think I really see a lot of the myth of Sisyphus in this story. I think a lot of this feels like, for all the political elements of the story and the war drama elements of the story, I also think a really big element of it is Greek tragedy. I think this is written, to me, it feels almost fully written in this. It's like a war story set in the style of a Greek tragedy. Um, and I think that the idea of Sisyphus, right, rolling that boulder up the hill forever and never being able to accomplish that task, I think that really represents the idea of the unending cycle of violence that this show spends a lot of its time focusing on.
it.
I think what's interesting is there's a lot of I don't know how old Hajime. I mean, I think you would call this like a newer generation of manga, but I mean, it's still pretty old. I mean, I think what the anime came out in 2012, but
The book started in 2009, I believe.
2009, yeah. So I think the Breaking Bad is probably is I mean, yeah, I think that makes sense. Even I think what you're seeing with the new manga, I think this applies to Demon Slayer. I think it applies to JJK. Any Mappa production, Chainsaw Man, you're seeing like a Western influence in terms of like media. Like you're seeing Tarantino, you're seeing Breaking Bad. I think
Um,
Game of Thrones is a big one.
and by the way, young guy, he's 37 years old. So young guy.
37, yeah. I mean, so I'm
I think he's
30.
21 when he started it.
He was it's a real good possibility he was. I think Game of Thrones and Attack on Titan were kind of step for step in that when they first came out, of like, oh, who can kill off more main characters. And I think these newer generation manga are pulling, I think pulling the best from the Western and the Eastern and making this stuff that has the pacing and structure of, and sometimes tone of something like a Tarantino movie or Breaking Bad or what have you, but having like also having that other foot in, like, the Eastern stuff. And I think, yeah, like talking about cyclical nature of violence, I think the story, I mean, you could look at like a triangle of like Dune, of influence between Dune and Game of Thrones and Attack on Titan as well. And yeah, I mean, I think if there is something to compare this to, I think it's Game of Thrones. Like if there's a one, I think the Breaking Bad one is interesting, but I think like Breaking Bad almost feels meek nowadays. You know, like it almost feels like a quiet show compared to like Game of Thrones or like some of this. I mean, The Boys. This. I think Game of Thrones is probably like the best example. I think.
Yeah. Speaking about
I think that's
Breaking
a good
Bad,
point too.
What point?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, just that the idea of it being one foot in the Western world and one foot in the Eastern world, and kind of learning from kind of
Yeah.
the best or most appreciated of both, and kind of mixing elements together to really create some really interesting new stuff.
Yeah, so it's because Mappa did this. And they did Chainsaw Man real quick. If the Chainsaw Man is that guy is like a fan of the Coen Brothers, he's fan of Tarantino. I mean, he's got to be a fan of Breaking Bad. So it's like, yeah, that's what kind of illustrated when I saw Chainsaw Man reference Reservoir Dogs. I was like, okay, yeah, like the world has gotten so small at this point that everything is everything essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned Breaking Bad. Mentioned with the protagonist of played by Bryan Cranston and Walter White, who is on the Mount Rushmore of your anti-hero in shows. There, with like people like Tony Soprano, people like maybe Omar from The Wire, and much like with those kind of characters, and with the character of Aaron Yeager, very polarizing figure in the anime
Yeah.
community, in the anime world. Um, and some people idolize him, some people hate him. What is kind of your opinion now that the show is done of Aaron Yeager, and when it comes to in terms of just anime protagonists?
You asking who you asking?
I'm asking. I'll start with you, Ant. I'll start with you.
I think I idolize Aaron Yeager in context. Like, I mean, genocide is fucking terrible, but I like how driven he is. Like there's nothing getting in his way. And I'm gonna throw out a hot take out here. I like his arc better than Walter White's, because Walter White's arc is very non-linear. It's kind of like he wants to be good, he wants to be bad, he wants to leave, he kind of wants one foot in. Aaron's is a straight. It's you can really trace everything throughout the arc, and you can trace when he gets radicalized. I mean, they have the first the first episode, like, had, like, they referenced it in like the last season, part two. So I think it's a matter of taste, but I think like I would put Aaron at the top of the anti-hero pyramid just because of that, because it is a consistent through line. There is no moment where he's not. Everything leads to this, as well. So I think he's supposed to be conflicted. I think that's a good thing. If everybody was like, oh, this Aaron guy is spitting, then I think that'd be very disturbing. So I think it's good that it's divisive. I think he's an incredibly well written character. I think I admire certain things about him, but I think like ultimately, like yeah, he's he's a wild dude, man.
What about you, say?
I it's interesting. I think there is nuance to apply to his character for sure. I think the way I would describe it is that I don't like him, but I pity him kind of in the same way that I pity Oedipus Rex, if that makes sense. There is a there's this concept with him where he's it's I think the one of my favorite lines of any story is Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen saying, "I can change almost anything, but I can't change human nature." I think that applies quite well here, and I think Aaron himself as a character is kind of a living philosophical paradox where he is both victim and perpetrator, right? And that's part of the point of the story, right? Is you take a character who you can sympathize with at a certain point, and then you intentionally take him to the point to draw. Because I don't have sympathy for him by the time you get to the where it goes, but I do have pity,
Pity.
and I think I have pity. I think he is there's an element of him that is so innately corrupt on like an inner spiritual level, and I think the part of it that is a tragedy where I think you can find sympathy is that he's so like that on a base inner level that I think there's an element of kind of some fate in play in the story, but I think that's really just a more of a metaphor for the fact that he's incapable of fighting his own nature, and that yet it is his nature to fight, and so he is a paradox inside of a person that and he's chasing this nebulous idea of freedom that he doesn't even 100% understand. He just wants it, almost acting on like animalistic instinctual levels. And so like I pity him because he's incapable of denying his own violent nature, but I don't like him.
Do you hate Marley? Like, cause I find myself really like I think I'm sympathetic just because like he got radicalized, like literally. I mean, it's like the best. It's like if his mom doesn't get eaten, like but you could also argue. I think this is a complexity that like his event, like the course he took, did like it. Man, it's so it's you get so whenever you have genocide as a plot device, it gets so nasty. You don't want to say anything. I'll pivot off of that. But I hated Marley. Like I found myself like not the individuals, but just
they're Nazis.
They're not. Yeah, I mean, yes. Like, yeah. They're not. But it's also like, bro, y'all could have stopped this. Like, y'all didn't have to do. You could have left them on the. Bro, who knows how long? Like, if the Titans, if they just didn't send over the Titans, like, how long would it take them to even make? Like, I guess having send the Titans necessitated them to be like like have the walls and stuff, but like they were so far technologically they didn't even have trains, bro. Like they weren't fucking with y'all, bro. Like it was so unnecessary. Like yeah, I hate Marlians so much. Not Marlians, but
No, I
Marley.
totally do too.
Yeah,
I think you're on to a great point there, and I think that is a big part of what the show is ultimately trying to be is a cautionary tale, and it's like it's trying to say like almost that like people need to push their own governments to not do things like this because there is going to come along that one crazy motherfucker that's going to push that nuke button, right? Like there is like the errands of the world will exist, and that is who they are on the inside. Like they are capable of that because it is within their nature to do it. And there is a monster in people like that, but there's also, if there was a larger effort from societies to treat each other kindly, we could avoid the moments where monsters like that get into power in this.
I think there's an interesting parallel between Jaeger and Killmonger. For instance, I was talking to somebody about Killmonger, and I think one of the things I think I think that movie kind of failed, in my opinion, in that we don't really get to see what a Killmonger Wakanda looks like, right? Like we don't get to see the implications, the social political implications of like somebody's news coming in. Do people agree? Do people disagree? But that's what Attack on Titan. I think we can talk about season 4, part 2 now. I think that's why one of the things I liked about season 4, part 2. Jesus, a mouthful. Is that you got to see like some people were like fucking with them, some people weren't. I think most people were fucking with them, and you really get to see like, okay, what does Aaron's parody look like? And I want to praise the show for that as well. And I think like I said, I want to emphasize like every part of the show is fantastic. Sage, I was curious, like what part of the show is your favorite? Like what season? I'm partial to season 4, part 1. Once they get the back to parody, and then also season 3, part 2, where they're battling against the Beast Titan and Reiner and them.
Yeah, no, I would say that the kind of season that like 28 episode stretch, like kind of right
Sheesh.
before the 2 specials, is my favorite kind
Okay.
of area of the show. That part 1, part 2 of season 4, because it does dig so deep and get so into the gritty details of it. And you know, I think that's something I really appreciate about this story is it just refuses any sort of simple answers, any sort of simple, you know, any simple solutions that like fiction might normally provide in a lot of stories to make the audience feel good about it. It's kind of it kind of actively denies that at every turn. I mean, just take the basement reveal as like a conclusion to the more fantasy based first 3 seasons of the story. You know, you could easily see another anime have that build up and then have there be like a cure in the basement and it ends the story and they've taken care of the problem, but instead it's a whole new can of worms, right? And I think all the way to the end, the show does a very good job of never offering simple solutions. Nothing's ever easy like that because it's not easy like that in the real world. And I think that is the show itself is at, you know, it kind of is a takedown of Eren as a character in its own way, because that is what he is. He is someone that is looking for a simple solution, a way to just solve a problem without doing the work of really kind of connecting human beings to each other in a real way. It's just, you know, violence is an easy answer. That's what I'm going to do.
To be fair, he had exactly like 11 years when he found that found that.
No, and I mean he's in a tough spot. Like, don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot of trauma and tragedy that happens to him that I think makes him, you know, I think in earlier parts of the story, I think it's very easy to sympathize with him because it is horrible thing after horrible thing after horrible thing keeps happening to him. But I think when you, especially like on a rewatch, watch the whole thing, you go back to the earlier parts of the story, I think it retroactively improves the first like couple seasons quite a bit, because there are there are other layers and other stories kind of being told at the same time that you're just not kind of able to pay attention to the first time through. But like one moment in particular I want to highlight is when Annie, the female Titan, is chasing them through the forest, and Levi says, he looks at it, he sees kind of the way he's like not quite following orders. He keeps trying to argue with what they're saying, and he goes, I understand now. Aaron's a monster. It's not because of his power. It's because you literally cannot reason with him. And Levi says that in, that's like what the first 20 episodes. And then in that moment, Aaron makes the right choice to trust them, to follow them, and that backfires in his face and it gets all of them killed. And I think so there are these moments that they kind of reaffirm his belief that he should be a trigger hair ready to just step in, take things over, commit violence, and keep everyone else out of it, and not to trust it. And I think there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why his behavior is the way that it is. I think, but again, I think I think the story is still trying to point out that this is still the wrong lesson he's learning. I can understand why he's learning it or why he's taking that lesson from these events, but it is the wrong lesson to learn.
It's tragic. No, and I want to point out a couple things. Talking about Game of Thrones again, like the foreshadowing. I think a lot of the problems that I think early seasons of Attack on Titan had, and I think it's similar to the same problem that Game of Thrones season had. It's like they're just setting up so much. You can almost look at the parallel of like the White Walker and like the basement. It's like the basement is like such a big deal at the start of season 1, and then you don't get there until season 3, and like the White Walker starts. That's how Game of Thrones starts, and then you don't see him till season 3, like the end of season 3, I believe. And then the foreshadowing is crazy, like literally. I mean, we can go all day about like the foreshadowing here and like how much this guy is able to set up and pay off later. I think this is a show that retroactively gets better, and I think it's the most rewatchable show of all time because I think you're going to catch something. Like I think you're going to watch it and be like, oh shit, like yeah, like that happened. I mean, something that blew my mind away was like that one episode where Aaron can't he can't balance himself on the with the ODM gear. And then it turns out old boy like broke the gear, and then like he still overcame it, and it's like and then it like that's a great moment. Like that's like a shonen kind of like, all right, I've seen something like that in Naruto, and then you recontextualize it and you make it even more impressive. Like you make it even more like to your point. You're just and like I said, I think this is why to Sage's point. I think this is why I say this is like an incredible character arc because he's leaving the trail of breadcrumbs. Like Aaron doesn't ever act out of character. You know what I'm saying? Like there's never a moment where it's not building to the rumbling. Essentially, like it's masterful storytelling. It's incredible. I think. Yeah, I think like I said, season 3, part 2 is my favorite part. Also, real quick, I gotta go pretty soon, but like the mileage he gets out of the world building as well. Like I think Attack on Titan can be pretty convoluted. By the time you get to season 4, where it's like, oh, we can't kill people, we have to have them be eaten instead of killed, or like it gets a little silly. And then like Annie, like Annie has like literally every the female Titan has like every power essentially, like of the other Titans. It gets a little crazy, but I mean the Cart Titan having guns, and then the Colossal Titan being a nuke, he just gets so much mileage out of this premise. To just you would think that it'd be really restrictive. It's like, okay, there's nine Titan types. We don't even see, like, I feel like some of them we don't even see that much. Like maybe more, somebody see more than others.
That's true.
And then you're like, okay, and then everything makes sense logically. Like, oh, Zeke. I mean, oh my god, oh my fucking god, Zeke. I'm watching season 3, and I'm like, why is this dude throwing like the ball like a baseball? Like that's a plot hole. And it's like, oh, his mentor through base. It's brilliant. It's genius. Like the character details that he
Well,
sets up.
here's
Man.
a small thing.
Yeah.
So like in the beginning of this very beginning, you see kind of this image of all the walls, and you see there's like a river coming from each of the 4 directions, and they flow inwards. that only happens on an island because water, the way that the gravity of the water gets pulled through, it can only all get pulled to the center like that if it's like a small enough landmass for it to be an island.
Yeah, I mean, this
So
is making me want
that
to
right there.
rewatch it so bad.
Before you head out, Ant, final thoughts on season 4, and if you want to give your rating on it.
Oh man, I think season 4 is a 10 out of 10. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I think season 4 is it's like Breaking Bad season 4. Like I think Breaking Bad season 4 is like a perfect season. I think Game of Thrones season 4 is a perfect season. Like there, you can nitpick, but when you really step back, like I said, I think the mark of a good television show is that it works. It works on its own. Individuals like, okay, these are great episodes. These work individually, and then when you line them up, the narrative as a whole becomes even greater. And I think it accomplishes that. And again, like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad were like had 3 year like 3 seasons of world building. Like Attack on Titan essentially started from scratch with season 4. Like it was almost like a soft reboot, and it just hit its stride. I thought it was incredible. I mean, I think and then the other two parts are obvious. I mean, I haven't seen the finale, but I just know it's good. I read the manga. I think a lot of people read the manga. And yeah, no, so it's a 10 out of 10, man. It's phenomenal.
Sage, final thoughts, rating for season 4.
You said what?
I said, Sage, final thoughts and ratings for season 4.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think I would genuinely call it a masterpiece, and that is not to say that it doesn't have flaws either, but that is to say that that despite the flaws that do pop up along the way, the 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 thematic messages that it's trying to convey, the character arcs, everything ultimately comes together, and the big picture feels so conclusive, and so much of it works that whatever flaws are there are, for me at least, very easy to forget in the face of all that it does right. This is I'm again, I guess twice today, give it your highest rating of This Is Cinema. It is my favorite anime. The only other thing that even kind of sits on that shelf for me is like Cowboy Bebop, and that's kind of just those two. Yeah, I could not have been happier with the final episode, which we can get more into when we do the spoiler discussion. But yeah, incredibly happy with how it wrapped.
So, one of the rare shows in Attack on Titan, Ant and Sage said that ends on a great note, an amazing note for this show.
I,
Um, oh, yeah.
I'm about to say I don't think the ending. I have problems with the ending, which I guess we can get to in the spoiler. Like I don't think this stuck the landing 100%. Like I think thematically it did. Like it hits the broad stuff really well, but the nitty gritty, like Aaron's plan, and like it also has like the fate element where it's. I think he wrote himself out of a corner, or he gave himself some bail where it's like, look, my head is all screwed up. Like yesterday's tomorrow. But it's not. It
You said you hadn't seen the finale, right?
but I've read the manga. Like I'm familiar. Like I think, like I get the yeah, and I heard they improved on it as well.
That's what I was going to say. I had some issues with the final chapter of the manga. Like I said, I think of broad points, done well.
Yeah,
Some nitty gritty details about it that don't totally work.
yeah.
Personally, having watched the episode, I do think that they smoothed those issues out, for me at least, to
Yeah.
where I no longer have those same problems with the anime version of this.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah. So that was our thoughts on there on season 4. I still have to finish it, so when we do the spoiler review, I'll be all done with the show, and I'll be able to give my full opinion on season 4 and the ending of it, series finale there. But from these guys, high marks. They both gave it perfect scores. This is cinema for the both of them for Attack on Titan, the final season.